to tonight's Educate to Elevate session. My name is Joanna Lane. I'm the Director of Education with the NFCA, and we're thrilled to bring you another round of COVID-19 education. This time we're going to talk about the current season and how you can best protect your program and do things the right way to keep everyone safe and healthy. We are on the eve of the one-year anniversary from the 2020 pandemic shutdown, and some things have changed and some haven't. And because of that, we want to continue bringing you best practices for taking care of your team and keeping everyone safe and healthy. We have a great group of panelists. We're excited to get started. Let's get underway.
My name's Kerry Blaylock. I'm the head softball coach at Southern Illinois University. And I also took on the responsibility of kind of the COVID coordinator, along with our director of sports medicine, when all of this started, because I was the senior women administrator when it started. So that's kind of a dual duty I have, and have been involved with kind of all of our planning with our emergency operations committee on campus, our athletic department, and our local health department. So as well as being the head coach and dealing with the softball side of it, also dealt with the planning side of it.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Sammy, let's have you go next.
Hi, my name's Sammy Charters. I'm an assistant athletic trainer at the University of Tennessee. I am in my 6th season with the softball team. 2 years prior to that, I worked with the tennis team here at UT as well. And then currently I oversee 2 intern athletic trainers that work with the Spirit, so cheer and dance, and men's and women's tennis. And I also work with the golf team here at Tennessee.
Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate that. Let's see, Coach Griffin, you're up next.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Denny Griffin. I am the head softball coach at Alma College in Alma, Michigan. I have been here this on my 33rd year as the head coach. And prior to that, I started at Alma College as the head athletic trainer, and I've kind of gone through the ranks as, started as an assistant and elevated to the head athletic trainer or the head softball coach. And I've done pretty much everything, even been head stints as the athletic director. So, Division III, you wear a lot of hats, and I've been able to wear a lot of them in my 33 years as head coach, and I'm finished on my 38th year total at Alma College. So it's been a fun ride. So this year's been a little more fun.
Hard to do that when you're only 20 years old.
That's right. It's the way it is.
Coach Stanley, or Mr. Stanley, I guess I should say. We're all coaches here.
All good. Owen Stanley, Director of Sports Medicine and Head Football Athletic Trainer here at Missouri. Happy to be here. Appreciate you guys taking the time. Besides those titles, obviously part of the leadership on our COVID medical task force in regards to all things related for travel, hosting, away events, EAPs, you name it, everything encompassing it, including outside events, not athletic related, that are at our facilities. So kind of all the gamut been involved with.
Well, thank you all very much. We'll go around the horn. This is just a pretty introductory question, but what's the first thing a coach should consider when putting together a safe return to play plan? So Owen, let's have you start with this one.
Yeah, so from a return to play plan, are we talking post quarantine or post isolation? I guess I could cover both.
Let's go with both because I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go post isolation. So if you have a positive individual, a good game plan moving forward, it all depends on what you have at your fingertips as well. I would say definitely be involved with your athletic trainers and your team physicians for clearance of any cardiovascular issues prior to working back into participation. I'm sure everybody's heard of a lot of individuals doing EKG echoes and troponin levels. At least I would definitely probably think about doing blood work. But again, I would refer back to what your team physicians are comfortable with. And hopefully you all have a game plan moving into your seasons. And then from there, you look at pretty much a 4 to 5 day return post-COVID, because of the fact that they are isolated for 7 to 10 or for 10 days. And you're going to get deconditioned. So you want to at least work them in gradually, where you go about 25% activity level the first day, 50% the second day, 75% the third day, and kind of just as tolerated that fourth day prior to a full clearance. That would be a suggestion. That's what we work off of in the SEC, as I'm sure Sam will attest to. But those are the parameters that I would put around a COVID case. Now, as far as quarantine goes, as long as you have a symptom-free quarantine, it being 7 days now, most places with a test out, or 10 days without a test out, those individuals, excuse me, if you have the capabilities, I would keep them in some kind of cardiovascular activity and or training. Just make sure that they are by themselves when they do it. That way you can keep at least a base level of conditioning and training, so that you can kind of do a return to play a lot quicker and work within that 2-day time frame, getting them back acquainted with the sport and the rigors that you will see.
Thank you so much. Denny, maybe a little different in Division III, depending on, what resources you have available. Is it similar in some of the things, or do you have different advice?
No, I agree with Owen. And we had a individual, one of my players, was tested positive over the holidays, and came back, and she had, because of the length that she was at home, because they were home for 6 weeks, she came back and she jumped right back into our practices. But at the same time, shortly after that first week, she said, Coach, I'm just not there, and so the cardiac. She felt just tired, chest, some issues there. And I said, yeah, we're stopping. And we walked her down to the athletic trainer, to my athletic trainer, and said, here's what we got. And so, actually she stopped everything at that point. She went to our team physician, went to a cardiologist, everything checked out real well. And at that point, we put her on a return to play. Naturally, it's very slowly. I agree with Owen at 25%. And in my case, this young lady was fairly heavy anyway. And so she was just carrying a little extra weight. So a little out of shape after being home for 6 weeks and being having the COVID test positive. She didn't do anything. So we brought her on very, very slowly. And she's doing fine now. But we're the same part. I mean, our athletic trainers and all the other sports are taking those kids one by one, seeing our team physician, and if needed, going to a cardiologist and bringing them along. So I've seen them in a gym. They're outside. They got the harnesses on them. They're looking at their heart rates, and they have to wait for so many minutes for that final return to play. Okay. So our athletic trainers are doing a great job making those kids viable and healthy to play. So I think we're doing the same thing with what Owen's doing. I really do.
Thank you. And Kerry, maybe a little bit of a different take on the question. You've been involved in this from the very beginning. Has the theory changed on how you bring a kid back or what you do in a return to play scenario?
No, I think, from what Owen said, we follow kind of the same things, although our health department is a lot more strict than what they're dealing with. So we're a 10-day quarantine with a test out for a close contact. So we're not at 7, and it just depends, that's just the way it is in Illinois. I think that we're starting to learn more. I think our doctor is, the length of it and how you bring them back has not changed here at all. But what we're learning about things, probably we're just hopeful that the CDC, starts to adjust things based on vaccination and some things, because our county is very, very strict. And so that's what we're finding. And our university is very, very strict. As Owen mentioned it, a softball student athlete is not able to leave quarantine to do anything. A basketball student athlete is allowed, some supervised one-on-one if they are, non-symptomatic and just a close contact. So it's those things of the kids being, at home, not training, to make sure that we bring these kids back slowly so there's no injuries. That's the biggest thing. But Joanna, it really hasn't changed much since the beginning about the process that we need to bring positives back at all.
Thank you. And Sammy, when you go last, you kind of get to say whatever you want. Anything you would add or anything that you do differently?
Just one thing to add, especially being in season, just don't forget that it's not 4 days of practice. It's moving up to 100%. So if on the fourth day is your pre-game walkthrough and the rest of the team is not doing much, that student athlete still needs to be working up to a 100% effort. So sometimes coming back from quarantine or even isolation, they're going to need to be on a completely different kind of practice plan to make sure that they're stressed and that we feel confident that when they go into a game, they're ready for any situation, or they're ready for the length of the game, and participating in that. So that's just one thing in general in season can be kind of tough. But yeah, it's not 4 days of practice. It's working up incrementally and then making sure that they really have kind of been stressed and are ready for game participation before they go in.
Thank you very much. A lot of questions on travel. So Kerry, let's start with you. Let's go first to the bus route. Before you board the bus, what is your program doing? What are you communicating to your student athletes, to the bus company, and anyone else that may be involved?
Well, we went through our health department again, because really they're the ones who are going to determine, what happens if we have a positive and contact tracing and close contact. So we have a seating chart, and I worked really hard on that to, surround our kids. So if we have previous positives or we, we've got kids around the previous positives, we make sure the like households are together because they would go down together. So we did the seating chart. We bought, our health department said that if the bus is basically at a third capacity, which is what we travel, it seats 60. We have basically 22 or 23 that travel. We are masked and we bought face shields. So they said, if you are masked and face shield, then you could avoid that because you would be in PPE. Again, this is through our health department. I said, I'm claustrophobic and I'm not going to be in a face shield. So if I go down, and my assistant, she's in the face shield the whole time. But we talked about those sorts of things. We try not to eat on the bus. So we're constantly moving our masks. And we make sure on the road when we travel, like households in hotel rooms, different than what we used to do, because you'd want to get other kids to, connect and see each other, et cetera. You can't do that. But that's basically all of our snacks, things of that nature are all prepackaged now. No sticking hands in bags, et cetera. Hand sanitizer readily available. And we go zigzag through the bus. So, inside seat to outside seat, and kind of we zigzag through the bus that way. So just little things like that we've done to try to eliminate potentially some of the contact tracing.
Thank you. Denny, same question.
Yeah, we're doing some of the same things. I mean, our first trip was this past weekend. So of course, the first time you always live and learn and that type of stuff. But I brought in 27 kids plus 4 coaches this past weekend. And this weekend we're going down to Anderson and they have a JV. So I'm bringing the entire Monsters, and there's going to be almost 35 people on this 57 bus. So, I mean, it's going to be a big group. So, I mean, when we put seating charts together, naturally the roommates are together. We try to keep the roommates together and the residents all together, as much as we can keep those pods, as I call them, together. That's what we do on the bus. And same thing with the rooms. I mean, we're permitted 4 per room still. And so once again, the roommates are together. I do give them the opportunity to, give me a request and I'll look at them. But we will try to keep all the friends as much together as I can there. The food the same way. We have sack lunches and they're provided by our food service, and we pick them up and they got their names on them and they come up, grab their names. And once again, they're individually wrapped and they're individually prepared. So it takes that. So the road parts, as far as where you eat, we went to fast food and we got them individually. Kids would go in there and be spaced apart and did their order, and each order was packaged separately, and they took and they ran and they ate it. They did eat it on the bus, and just because from a time perspective too, we're trying to get back to. I will change things a little bit for this upcoming week, I think, but we are bringing more kids this weekend than we did last weekend, so that bus is going to be a little tighter.
Oh, and from your perspective, dealing with multiple teams, any advice that you give on how they coordinate their bus trips?
And like Kerry said before too, a lot of this also is determined based off your county and what their guidelines are going to be from a contact tracing standpoint. So first and foremost, with all of these conversation pieces and questions that we're getting asked, you got to be in tune with your county and what they're doing, because that is going to dictate how you set things up. And just for instance, with Kerry, they were masked and face shield. Well, it doesn't matter for our county if you're masked or face shield. If you're sitting next to somebody, you're going to get contact traced. So it's interesting how all these counties differ in certain ways and what they're going to decide to do on a contact tracing standpoint or isolation standpoint or quarantine standpoint. So that's first and foremost. Hopefully you have a good medical entity with you that can have that relationship with the county and knows all the rules that they'll be around, and then you can formulate a game plan moving forward. But when it comes to different entities, it also depends on the distance of travel. I mean, the distance of travel can affect, just like Denny was talking about, from the standpoint of if you're driving 8 hours, you're going to pull over and eat at some point in time. So what do you do with that? Is it better to eat on the bus if you can stay distance on the bus? Is it better to eat in open space if you have the temperature that's right for you? Pull over at a park. I mean, there's so many different avenues. Your biggest thing is just to really try to avoid that interface interaction with the possibility of exposure to air molecules and in close contact. And so whatever you can do to avoid that, that's kind of how you basis your travel around. And I would also say on the other side of things, if you can time out more time for that travel, you're going to have to plan out more time for that travel to make appropriate mitigation strategies in doing so.
Thank you. And don't worry, Sammy, you're not going to have to go last every time. Anything else to add on this one?
Yeah, similar to a lot of people, we keep our Knoxville roommates or roommates on the road. We created pods, so everyone eats together in their pods, and their pods are essentially their roommates. So again, from a contact tracing standpoint, we're hoping that when their mask is down, that they're at least with people that they already would have taken out. Our first road trip of the year, we were driving to South Carolina, and that was 7 hours with some rain in there to throw out some more time. So we did have to definitely adjust our game day travel. So we opted to leave earlier. All the girls were instructed to eat a good breakfast on their own. We do not allow food or snacks on the bus or in the dugouts at all. So again, anywhere where we would be promoting them pulling their mask down and kind of not wearing it properly. So we have removed that food component. Now, when we did stop at a rest stop to stretch our legs, we kind of brought out the snack bin, and it was permitted to snack like outside where they could really spread out. And again, we just told people you need to be in your pod. So get with your roommates, at least eat with your roommates. And we tried to minimize that. And then we just made sure that there was a meal immediately when we got somewhere, since we knew, I don't know about you guys, but our girls are always starving. So we just made sure that there was food as soon as they arrived at that new location. So we keep that on the road, home meals or away meals. We keep the same pods again and again.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of a different question. What is the most difficult thing about planning team travel and all things COVID related? Denny, let's have you go first on this one.
That's a good question, because like I said, we just had the weekend. For me, it was getting breakfast for the kids. We went to the hotel, and I'm a big fan of Hampton Inns because of their big breakfast. And it's really reduced as far as what they offer now because of the COVID. So we had to go out and purchase some foods for them to bring in and make sure it was individually wrapped and do those type of things. So to me, that was the biggest challenge for this past weekend. Let's just keep them fed. And then we always went we did the Subway, so they have individual sandwiches and they got their names on them, so the kids grabbed them. And then from between games, go out between games, and they separated and had their little Subway sandwich between games of the doubleheader. So, but that was, for me, that was the biggest challenge, is getting the breakfast and getting them fed properly.
Thank you. Sammy, how about you? A different challenge than you've expected? What keeps you up at night?
I think going into the season, one of my biggest things that I wanted to make sure is that I wasn't trying to detract from the game day atmosphere and the competitiveness of it all. So I didn't want to be the person in the dugout that was like yelling at people because they were standing too close to each other or that their mask wasn't on properly. So in January and February, before our tournaments, I really tried to focus a lot on anticipating. So running through what a normal game day is like, and anything that I think or that I thought would be unsafe, I tried to provide another option. So I wasn't just always the no person, but rather we can't do this, but we can do this instead, and trying to provide some of that. So it was harder than I thought to like anticipate every single thing that goes on in a game day when we're there 4 hours ahead of time, the whole game, and then post game, and repeat that, a couple days in a row. I was just trying to make sure my team was the safest that I thought we could be, but still let them go out and compete and kind of forget about COVID for a little bit was one of my goals at the beginning. So that was a little bit more of a challenge than I thought coming into season.
That's a great goal, and seemingly so simple, but that's a legitimately good goal. Owen, what do you think the biggest challenges are that you hear from your coaches and teams?
From coaches and teams, it's probably what Sammy touched on, is just making sure that individuals are practicing the right mitigation strategies in games, but it doesn't take away from the games. I think one of the bigger things planning wise that was always on rotation is kind of twofold. One, whether you had administration popping in and out of traveling with teams, and how you dealt with that from a standpoint of safety for them and safety for the team. And then two really was, okay, what do you do if you have a COVID positive on the road? And planning that strategy based around individuals that might be within their 90 days, who are you going to take away from a standpoint of, if you got to get a student athlete back, somebody might have to sacrifice being in quarantine when they get back. Who's that individual going to be on the team that takes that place? How do you get that done efficiently? What's the best way of getting them home? So that was one of the big keys and every road trip's different because, like I said, your 90 days might be up. You don't have that person that's inside their 90 days. Your county might contact trace, even if they're in 90 days from post COVID. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration when you're planning for anybody that might end up being positive on the road.
Thank you very much. Kerry, how about you? Anything that you would highlight as the biggest challenge?
I want to play off what Denny said. For us, because we have not flown and I don't have a director of, I'm the director of ops. So I let my assistants, I play director of ops, but food has been a big challenge because of, nobody wants the catering factor or whatever. I mean, we're not a let's go eat pizza type team. I usually feed the kids well. That's been a huge challenge on getaway day or going home day, finding some place along the way in Illinois, and some places that we've gone through. You can't go in to even stand in line to a Chipotle. It just doesn't happen anymore right now. So that's been a big key. From what Sam and Owen said, it was my number one goal that when we stepped out to play, that we weren't so preoccupied with they were talking about being the no person and mask, all this other stuff. I let them play. And you know what? If something happens, but we're going to try to be a little bit more normal. And that's gone over very, very well. The kids in the dugout have done a great job. And, when we go out for conferences on the mound, we all mask up. It's become second nature. But also, they knew my job on campus as being this COVID coordinator, and I didn't want to come to practice. And then all I do is say no. So we've worked real hard to make sure that we kind of give them the information and then go along.
Thank you very much. If you've been on these before, you know one of my favorite things to do is pick on people that join. And so Shauna Stanton, we've got Shauna Stanton on from Indiana, and I know that she might even be in Florida now, but I know she is. Yep, I know that they have flown. So Shauna, tell us a little bit about the flying experience and how do you keep your kids safe in that environment?
Well, thanks, Doc Lane. And, I tuned in tonight because Kerry is red hot and I just want to hear anything she's saying. And I look forward really, to tracking the rest of you guys. It's been awesome to hear what everybody's going through. And I just want to first encourage everybody, you're the leader that your teams need right now. So keep doing what you're doing. I'm super impressed and I look forward to following everybody's season. But flying, I tell you, our kids have done a phenomenal job. I feel our administration has really set us up to keep our players as safe as they can be. You're not going to eliminate all risk. And the minute we got on the plane, that's when my blood pressure went sky high. Because it's like we've done all these protocols and here we are jam-packed in a sold-out plane. And so what we did, we just usher them all to the back, and I'm that gal who's in the back kicking people out. And we just all go to the back. We take up 27 seats in the back, and that's what we decided to do instead of having them just with their kid that they're rooming with other random people. But that's a challenge, and we're going to bus anywhere else that we can. We felt Florida was a little bit too far. But we're going to bus to Maryland and some of those places that typically we would fly to. I'm not real into this commercial traveling because like you guys, everybody's doing such a phenomenal job. And I just don't think you can eliminate all risk. But we're trying to stay out of the bathrooms, trying to stay out of touching everything on the plane and, just kind of keep to ourselves, keep our masks on at all times. And we'll see what happens, but just have fun, like Kerry said. And thanks to you guys, everything that you're doing with this stuff.
You bet. Thank you. And thank you for sharing it. We were talking to some coaches the other day and it was interesting. And if any of our panelists want to weigh in on this, but they had said when they're traveling, especially commercially, that a big thing that they do is have every student athlete wear a hat and wear sunglasses if they don't have regular prescription glasses, that it just helps them keep their hands off their face, essentially. And I thought that was a pretty good point. There was a Washington Post article, I believe, or New York Times article or something about that. So if any panelists want to weigh in, you most certainly can. But, all these tips and things that people are doing, definitely worth considering. Fun question here, as far as fun can go, but more about team chemistry than the coronavirus in a lot of ways. Are you worried about the same kids being around each other all the time? They live together, they play together, now they're on the bus together and on the road together. And you talked a little bit about this, Kerry. You tried to separate them and have them room with different people. Does that worry you at all about spending too much time together?
We actually, I broke up some of the roommates and put previous positives together that wouldn't get contact traced or within their number of days. But I don't really worry about that anymore. I think what's been so great, they were so excited just to practice and be around each other and to be able to play games and travel. We haven't had any issues at all. I mean, they're accepting of what is going on right now. My phrase that I've said since this started is this is a 100-year event, right? The last one happened 100 years ago. So in a 100-year event, you've got to do things differently than you've done. You can't, it can't be normal. It has to be one in 100 years, and we'll get through it. This isn't going to last forever. And so for this year, we have to do some things that may be out of our norm. And that's kind of how I've tried to approach it.
Same question, Denny, for you from a coaching perspective. Any concerns chemistry-wise or things you're doing?
No, not really. I mean, at Alma College, the institution is kind of, I'll call it a lockdown for anything else. I mean, the kids have been on campus since January. They've been told not to leave campus at all, 10-mile radius from the heart of the campus. 2 weekends ago, I called it, they had the big weekend. I called it jailbreak weekend. And, they had a 4-day weekend where they were allowed to go home and go back and go do whatever. And then when they got back the following Monday, the entire campus was tested with PCR testing. And, came back really, I think they had 8 positives and they've all recovered since then. So the fact that they have not been allowed to even mingle in the residence halls. I mean, they're allowed to see each other, through in classes and stuff, but they're not even allowed to go to individuals' rooms. So the fact that when they come to practice, that is the time when they can really mingle, and that's a good time to see their friends. You see the team chemistry just blossom. I mean, and that was really on. Now it's considered better because our positivity rate is really low, and our numbers, don't exist in the COVID hall, as we call it. There's nobody in there. So the administration has opened it up considerably to allow that interaction within the residence halls. This past weekend when we traveled, it was like Florida. We did not get our Florida trip. It was taken by administration and used it for reading days, and so they have 5 one-day weekend days off called reading days, and that's come up. Another one's coming up next week, which the kids are looking forward to. But we're still here for softball. But the fact that they can come together every day and practice. We were outside for the first time on our field, March 10th. It's 60 degrees, and you can just see the excitement in their eyes and their giggles and their fun. We're outside, and so just getting together their team chemistry is going really strong right now.
Thank you very much. Another question from the chat. It says been recommended to increase cleanliness and things with the dugout and game balls and everything in between. What protocols should be in place for sanitizing between innings, etc.? Sammy, let's start with you on that one. What are you guys doing, and what are some ideas that you have?
So in terms of sanitizing the dugouts themselves, we sanitize, I think it's approximately 3 hours before game time. And then no one's permitted to enter until the teams arrive. And then the only other time we sanitize during games and things like that would be if there was a dugout switch or a dugout turnover from a tournament. Otherwise, it's just pre and post. One thing we did make sure was that for tournaments especially, that our trash was definitely taken out after each team as well, with just kind of, an old trash sitting there in general. And then for game balls or game equipment, we had done a rotation with our softballs. So some were used on one day, and then basically they were set outside or set to sit. And then we used different balls the next day. So we had gotten some tips from the MLB regarding what they were doing when they had started their season. And that was the recommendation based on the leather of the softballs and things like that. On game day themselves, if we have the opportunity to not take the foul balls and put them directly into our bin for game day balls, again, we kind of put them off to the side. Hoping that Mother Nature can help us kill some germs just with sunshine and being sit out in open air. That was our biggest recommendation. And then our dugouts personally go towards the concourse. So we just made sure that no one else was accidentally accessing our dugout or that there was any fan interaction, so that once we knew it was sanitized, we were kind of ready to go, ready to compete. And it was the cleanest possible for our team. And that's kind of our big thing on game day, especially, and that's just translated to practice.
Thank you very much. Owen, from your perspective, anything you need to be doing in between sessions and practices?
I think that Sammy needs to go first more often, because she answered all the things that we are doing as well. I'd say the only thing we did add, and it might be a little bit overkill, is we got touchless spigots on all of our coolers, so that you just put the cup up there, so there's not consistent touching of the spigots on the coolers throughout game day, which you could also just have an individual fill those cups as well as individual cups or individual bottles for each umpire, just touching on that, so that there's no shared water usage between athletes, coaches, and umpires.
Good to know. Kerry, how about you? What protocols do you have in place or pieces of advice?
Yeah, I think Sam and Owen touched on everything as far as that goes. We've really made sure that there's hand sanitizer in each dugout. I do agree with the softballs. Don't put water and don't, softballs, you do that and they're going to be heavy as all get out. You just have to let them, air out and go from there. We've provided the umpires, obviously, gloves when they do bat checks. That's another thing. So they'll put on gloves. They want to do that. We antigen test the umpires at our facility before. That's what our conference rule is. So we'll antigen test them as an extra precaution also.
You know, and I had heard in another conversation, Kerry, there was a tournament, tested umpires, had the umpires together, umpire tested positive, lost all the umpires because they were essentially in a holding area together waiting for test results to come back. Do you isolate umpires with testing?
They're outside. They sit outside of we have a small locker room, training room, but they will stand outside socially distanced and masked and, go from there. We actually have the capability at our place. If we needed to, we could PCR test them rather quickly to find out if it was a false positive on the antigen. Just our local hospital, which does all of our testing, can do that. But yeah, we try to keep them separated. Everybody gets their own room. Our conference does not allow them to go out to eat together. They're pretty much, when they get there, they have to remain kind of separate and to stay away from contact tracing.
Good tips. Thank you. Denny, you get to go last. Anything you have to add?
Well, I mean, they're all on the same page as far as sanitizing the dugouts between games and that type of stuff, cleaning them out. The balls is a new one. We haven't had a home game yet, so I mean that's on the 20th. I like the idea of just letting Mother Nature do what they do, and hopefully that will help. But the testing the umpires is something that is on the protocol. They're actually going to test 3 umpires, and they will either use all 3 or they'll just use one, and that way, if there's a positive test on one of them, we have 2 left to umpire the game with. So that's kind of the basic. Our umpires are day people. They come in, they go out, they don't stay overnight. So you don't have that hotel issue that maybe at the Division I level you might have. So we haven't, like I said, I don't think any of my colleagues have played a home game yet. So our new protocols are about to get put into action here.
That's right. Well, in addition to umpires, other people you have to worry about sometimes are parents. So question for you all, how are you managing parents in contacts with their children, student athletes, and do you have rules in place for that? Sammy, you were a big hitter last time. Let's go ahead. You kick this one off too.
So our conference had a general policy for parents and interactions, especially dealing with hotel. I guess I was fortunate enough that my coaches, I had given my recommendations to the coaches of what I think should happen. And then ultimately my coaches met with our captains and our captains met with our team, and they kind of came up with their own team policy for both home and away. So that was definitely a big concern. I know there was a question about team chemistry, but the season could be long, and I know that generally our parents travel very well, and they were a huge support system for our student athletes. So that was definitely a big concern for us, that say we had the rule where they were absolutely not allowed to interact with our parents. We thought that was going to be pretty detrimental to our team in a lot of ways, and team chemistry, mental health, and things like that. So our team had opted to have the same rules for home and away games. One thing we asked or told our parents that they were not allowed to stay at the team hotel. So wherever we stayed, they were not allowed to stay there, so that you just didn't have any accidental, I saw my mom in the lobby and whoops, we sat for 45 minutes and talked. So our director of ops was able to give that information out to the parents and ask that they did not stay in the same team hotel. So that was the first thing. The second thing that we've done is that we've instituted family time immediately following our games. So we sent rules out to our parents as well, that we asked everybody kind of within a household to stick close to their own area, try and sit 6 feet apart from their student athlete, masks on, and then we've opted to always do that outside, so never an indoor space, to just try and help mitigate that. So immediately after home games, our stands are cleared, our parents and our athletes go up there, we start a clock, and then we round them up after about 20 minutes, give or take a little bit of travel time. And then we do that same policy on the road as well. So not necessarily always in the stands, but immediately following a game. Usually it's a parking lot so far, but that they're able to see their parents for that limited amount of time, and then they kind of rejoin the bubble. So we spoke with the parents directly, and then we also just asked to make sure that our student athletes, that their parents kind of opted into our policies and understood why we wanted to do that this year, and give us a chance to compete and have enough people to play. So that's what we've done with parents.
And that terminology is so key, right? Give us a chance to compete. You've been waiting a year to get back on the field, and anything but malicious contact with a parent can be very detrimental to that. I like that phrase a lot. Kerry, I started to ask the question and you were nodding almost immediately. I'm guessing you've dealt with this on a few different fronts, maybe with different teams and ideas. What's your policy and how are you putting that into play?
We do allow our parents to stay at the hotel, but I actually think that's a really good plan that Tennessee came up with. That's really, that's kind of cool. Because I was stressed about it. I was stressed that, what do you do? And, talking to the kids, and what we decided to do is on the road, obviously they can't go out to eat with their parents. We allow them to sit in the lobby distanced and masked. And I told them that I do not want to be the COVID police. So it's going to be super stressful for me to come around and have to police you. We have a great leadership. We've got great captains. And so I don't really have to worry about that part. We have a lot of parents that have already been positive, just coincidentally, however it may be. So that takes the stress away a little bit from me. At home games, probably more stressful than away games. At home games, now that the restaurants in Illinois have opened up to where you can have some capacity, going out to dinner, all those types of things. I just basically, told the kids, laid out, here's what could happen. If this happens, here's, contact tracing, close contacts, quarantine, laid out the whole scenario, and put it in their hands. I believe if you're going to have a team, you have to trust them. If you're going to have a team that you feel like can compete at this high level, that you're going to have to trust them. And if it doesn't work, then it will fall apart, And so that's kind of the approach I've taken this year. We have a veteran team, good leadership, good captains. Believe me, that doesn't happen every year. And some years I wouldn't be able to do that. But that's I've kind of laid it all out for them and, told them, it's going to be up to you and how you handle things, whether we go forward and we complete it. We've given you all the necessary knowledge of what's going to happen.
Thank you very much. Shonda, that might be the key to that red hot start, right? That veteran team and great leadership, definitely no replacement for that. And how about you guys in thinking about parents? What advice have you given to teams?
Oh yeah, I think we did touch a lot of the same things. Is more or less just making the kids, or not making, but presenting all the information to the kids, student athletes, as well as the parents, being very open. We actually did a bunch of different Zooms with our medical task force, with all of our sports teams, both for parents and for student athletes, and kind of just presented all the information and what the consequences are if things just didn't go the right way. And so, we implement the 6 feet and masks at all times when you're around your parents. Obviously, it's tough when you're at home and they want to see them and they can go to their apartments or wherever it might be. And you can't just sit there and like Kerry said, you can't police them 24/7. So that's where we kind of wanted to be very open with all of our student athletes' parents on what our plans are and how we'd like to see it come to fruition so that we can give them the best chance to play. And then left it open for questions as well. And it really went well from that standpoint, because we took questions all the way from kind of what we're doing here to other things about the virus and everything else. And so we presented it with our team physicians as well. And that's been very successful, just to keep individuals or help them become educated about everything around what we're doing here at Mizzou, as well as what's going on with the pandemic itself.
Yeah, tremendous idea, and probably for all levels. I know we've got some high school coaches on the call also, whose seasons have probably yet to start, and something that you can do as well. Whether you're in the same geographic area or a little more diverse. And Denny, I'm guessing you've got a large roster, so you're going to take them all, and mostly from the same geographic area. So probably have a lot of parents that might be lingering. They're ready to watch some softball as well. What's your plan for the masses?
Oh, they are itching like no tomorrow. The two sites we went this past weekend only allowed their parents, athletes, the parents to show up. Ours were not allowed, and of course, my parents were not very happy with those protocols. But I did laugh because I did have one set of parent did show up on my first game and apparently did not receive the emails I had sent out. So I wandered down there and said, "What the heck are you doing here?" And you take off that Alma sweatshirt, turn it inside out, take off the Alma hat, and you go down in the center field and you mingle as much as you can with those other people and just stay away from us so you don't get kicked out. But it really depends. Division III is going really kind of a conference wide, and then within the conference, each institution has their own little policy. I know for Alma College, we have just opened up. Our basketball season ended, and they just, the last 2 weeks of the season, allowed visitors, parents mostly, and students on campus, and they had to sign up and actually go through the testing, or go through the, you get your temperature checked, and then of course had a social distance and all that type of stuff. And that is the plan for us as well. We're going to be allowed to have 2 parents per player, and then students as well allowed to sign up. And then we actually talked today about where do we put them. We have our stands. We got the parents like to bring lawn chairs, great avenue in our outfield to watch the game from that perspective. So we had a great discussion with my AD in that respect. So we will have fans, but they will be required to be masked. The parents will be required to be masked while they're on campus. I know when we played this past 2 days, we were in masks. We were told by my administration our outfielders could take them off, but everybody else had them. Franklin, who we played, was kind enough to wear a mask, and then Mount St. Joe, some of their players had them, some of them did not. But at all times when we were dug out and spaced out, we all had our masks on. But that's just really Division III. That's it. It's just conference to conference, institution to institution to make this happen. But I think once we get outside more, I think those parents are going to start sliding in pretty easily.
Not going the Astros route with 40,000 people full capacity yet, huh? You have to wait on that one.
It just depends on the day is. If we had to play today, I think we had a great contingency because it's 60 degrees outside in central Michigan. So let's go back, bring them on.
Absolutely. Question on some of the auxiliary areas. Have things like the press box and training rooms and those spaces been open to you? And how are different components of your staff handling their job in terms of where can they go? And we think about sports information and if you're the athletic trainer for a visiting team. Sammy, we'll roll with you. Have you had access to those areas, and what's that been like?
Yeah, so as much as possible, at least from an athletic training standpoint, we ask that, one, if you're requesting to use a team space, that you do that ahead of time, that you ask about it so that we are able to make sure, for example, that our student athletes are out of the facility so that there's no cross of anything. So far, I personally haven't gotten any requests, and then I have not requested it of someone else. I've kind of stuck to doing my stuff in the hotel as much as possible before going in, or making sure that there's that avenue from an athletic training standpoint. From a facility standpoint, anyone that's ground level with our teams or has the potential to interact with our team, so including like our event management staff, our grounds crew, people that are there, and the potential to, especially the visiting team, those people are in our testing protocol. So our goal is that if someone is tested home or away, that they're sticking with other people that have been tested, and that they stay with those people as well. So the way that our softball facility is set up, our press box is not very conducive to social distancing itself. And so currently the people that are in the press box do not have direct access to any student athletes or coaches or anything like that, because they are not currently in our testing protocol. So anyone that is like our SID is in a separate area off to themselves, since they are tested and they have interaction with our team. So that's what we've tried to do, especially creating like a flow plan of where people walk and who can come in the clubhouse, who can't. And then even when the visiting team's coming, how are they going to get off their bus? Who are they going to interact with? And try and make sure those paths are only their own team or anyone that's been tested, so that we are able to backtrack and contact trace them moving backward. So we've had to cut down on some, I guess, the Division I, like just people kind of popping in to say hi to the team or anybody ahead of time. We've made it very much known that basically we're sticking with our bubble, and our bubble has been the same since January. So we appreciate your services and we appreciate your support, but please do not come around our team and stick to Zooms and FaceTimes and things like that. So that's what we've been doing, is just, again, sticking to our bubble and then keeping that bubble as safe as possible on game day as much as we can.
Thank you. Kerry, anything to add on that one?
Same thing. Press box. We've got plexiglass put up. So, your video board operator, scoreboard operator, I think there's four or five people allowed in there. It's small. In our clubhouse, the only people that are allowed in there is our athletic trainer, coaching staff, and the players. We used to have an umpire room in there, but now we actually house them somewhere else on campus. So it's a kind of a small operation. Our groundskeeper, while he's out working on the field, again, it was warm here today. He can have his gator, pulled down while he's out working on the field out by himself. As soon as anyone's within any proximity of him, he has to have it on. But that's about the only other people that, everybody else is tested. They're in the tier where, if they come around, we allow fans right now. We allow 90 that are in the stands, distanced in small pods. And then we have kind of a berm above center field and right field that we allow lawn chairs and people to sit out, but it's a much smaller scale than it has been.
Thank you very much. Owen, anything to add?
I like going third. I don't have to say much. Things they touch base on everything. I mean, your biggest thing, no matter what level you're at or what you're dealing with, is you want to create that pseudo bubble around your team, and mitigate the interactions that you have from individuals that aren't around you guys from a quote unquote 24/7 standpoint. And so just getting rid of that interaction, however best you can, it will keep you all safe for all of spring in your season.
Thank you. And Owen, I'm going to stick with you, just kind of a different question here, and then we'll move along. I want to make sure I get to all these before we run out of time. If I skip any of you and you want to jump in on one, please feel free. As vaccination numbers increase, how will you handle testing and seating charts and things with people who have received 1 or 2 doses of a vaccine? And then with the previous positives, how long is that good? And when do you have to retest or be worried about a potential secondary positive?
Yeah, great questions. Good news is I don't establish those rules. That's why we have CDC in counties. So I'm gonna use that question and defer to them, especially from a vaccine standpoint. And we just don't have full detailed information, longevity, and how it's going to last. So you stick to date on what the CDC in your county and your state mandates are. And whatever they're going with, that's what you got to abide by. And they're really just, again, going back to mitigation strategies to prevent another, I'll call it tertiary because it'd be a third time, spike in cases, especially with variants coming out. As far as, your day post positive. I mean, 90 days is still where it's at. I know our conference as a whole, as the SEC, has expanded that to 150. But again, wherever you're at, I would stick with what the CDC in your county are dealing with and or what they're stating from a mandate, just simply based on the fact that it'll give you the most ability to mitigate exposure strategies.
Thank you. Kerry, same kind of question. I know you're doing a lot there, a little bit of a different protocols maybe than Missouri. What are your thoughts on those questions?
Yeah, just like Owen said, it's a county thing. I check with our county right now. We're still in vaccinating either 65 or older or 18 and older with pre-existing conditions. That's where we're at right now. We haven't gone any further than that. So we've also made it clear to our student athletes, one of our arena is a mass vaccination site. So we want to make sure that our kids don't go, over there quite yet. I did talk to our health department. They said if you've had 2 weeks after your second shot, which I have been vaccinated twice, 2 weeks after your second shot, you will not be quarantined as a close contact as long as you have no symptoms. So that's what our county's doing, again, following. But they told me today, they said, be ready to pivot because things are changing all the time. Hopefully our county is telling us that pretty much anybody in our county that wants vaccinated, they're thinking by May, the end of May, that will be able to be vaccinated. I think that will be a turning point for, student athletes, for all of us when that occurs, if they choose to be vaccinated, because that will help out with a lot of congregating, the close contact tracing, things of that nature. We've not seen someone who has been positive in our athletic department be positive again. Through all of our testing, that has not happened yet.
Thank you very much. Sammy, anything to add on those topics?
No, one thing that was brought up, something to consider, I guess, softball specific was, we've been talking about our game plan of our student athletes are here through May, but then typically they go home in June. And so what does it look like if the first vaccine is available to them in Tennessee, in May, but then they have to come back or somehow get the second vaccine, the 3 weeks later, depending on, at least working off the Pfizer and Moderna timeline compared to the Johnson & Johnson. So that's one thing that's just been put on our radar, and we're thinking about that opportunities at home versus opportunities through Knoxville or through our city where the university is, only because we want to make sure if someone gets the first dose that then they're safely able to get the second dose, to make sure that they're fully vaccinated and we don't have anyone kind of slipping through the cracks. So that's just something that we've thought about, similar, looking at our timeline here in Tennessee and when that might fall, to get college age students vaccinated.
Thank you very much. Denny, a little bit of a different question for you. This is kind of a fun one. Have you had any pleasant surprises through all of this? Anything that you think the year of pandemic has brought to your program that's been a plus?
I don't know, there's been a plus. I mean, I've always tried throughout the year. I think like Sammy was talking, Owen was talking about, and Kerry was just trying to keep it, I don't want to say normal, but try to keep it as less stress as possible. And I think that the fun part is seeing how the kids have reacted. They've been very good about it. And yes, it's a 100-year thing, as Kerry said, and we have to wear masks. But it's been fun just to watch them maybe grow, maybe care about themselves a little bit more. And when we had fall practices, we did some small group stuff, and then because the state told us that we had to get smaller groups, and then the last 2 weeks of practice, we were allowed to have our total team back again. And those days that they were all together, it was fun to watch the giggles. It was fun to watch a little extra pep in the step that they were due. But I think they're also appreciative of the fact that they get to play again. The fact that we're face to face, and we've been face to face since September. And so it's just fun to be back to school and to see their friends again. They were disappointed when not able to get to Florida. That's been probably the biggest disappointment, is that took our spring break, and that, because that's the big highlight of any season for Division III, is the chance to go down there and play for 8 days, and the team chemistry and the camaraderie and the team bonding. But it's just being in warm weather, and that's what I've been trying to do for this week, last weekend, and this weekend, is just get out of town for a few days and kind of create that same type of spring break. But I have seen that they seem to care about each other maybe a little bit more than they have in the past, just because they get a chance to play, they get to do this, and we haven't had any issues. Now I'm holding my breath because we all get tested tomorrow for the weekend, and so we get tested once a day or once a week, and so my fingers are crossed. I'm saying prayers that we don't have any positives starting tomorrow afternoon.
Well, we'll cross some fingers for you as well. Thank you for that. Kerry, how about you? Any positives that you didn't expect?
I think the normalcy, the first tournament when we went out, the normalcy of everything, and the energy that they are bringing right now is contagious. And like Denny said, we had to get tested Monday, Wednesday for our trip to UAB, and I get the results along with our director of sports medicine. So I get the results to pass along, and they've started doing the COVID-free chant every time, we make it. So that's a positive too, but it's been a lot of fun. Sure to appreciate it a lot more, again, and it's been great to just compete.
Absolutely. A little bit of a different question for you guys, Owen and Sammy. What's the best question that a coach has asked you in this process? Or what's a question that you've gotten and you've thought, that's fantastic, more people need to ask that or think about that? Owen, let's have you go first, just because you jinxed yourself last time.
So the best question, it depends. Do you want the best? Well, I can't give you the best question that made me really, really think, because I can't put that out there. But, and most of you coaches probably know where I'm coming from with that one. Gosh, to be honest, I think the whole process in and of itself, just the initiation when this came out last March, I guess it was, just being able to never have had this in my lifetime, and many people's, obviously most of our lifetime, something near this type of ramification, and what it does to our student athletes as a whole. And probably just, okay, it's the initial question, where do we start, right? Where do we start? So, just the totality of itself is just mind-boggling, where you think about where we started and where we're at now. And just getting that initiation starting to think outside the box on how we're going to be able to pull this off and keep individuals safe, keep coaches safe, keep administration safe, and especially student athletes and whoever they come in contact with, whether it be parents, grandparents. So, I know that's probably a little bit of a cop-out, but to be honest with you, the totality of it is unbelievable. And so just that initiation of where we started, and how do we handle this? And so that would be what I would say is the toughest or best question so far.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll try to think of a better one to put you on the spot with here in just a few moments. But Sammy, anything from your perspective that you've gotten question-wise?
I guess in some ways I feel fortunate that softball did not compete this fall at all. So we have watched other teams screw up. And then my coaches, the best questions I've gotten is like, so how do we not be like swim? So how do we not be like volleyball? And I'm like, that's great. That's a great point. Let's make sure our team knows not to do that so that our whole team isn't quarantined or things like that. So in some ways, not competing this fall was not the best, but we got to take all the knowledge from travel, all the knowledge from, big rosters like football, smaller. We were different in the fact that we were the first teams that did like multi-team events. So the first softball tournament we had threw everyone for a loop a little bit. And then, obviously we're spending more time in one place. So we've had to do those hurdles, but yeah, some of my favorite questions were, I guess, a little bit like, "Ooh, did you hear what happened to that team? How do we not be like them?" Which got my brain working of like, "Ooh, I didn't even think about that. Like, I could have put our team in a bad situation there." So those were kind of like my favorite, like, "Ooh, write that down and find an answer about that one." And knock on wood, so far we haven't set our bad example. So that's worked out okay.
When you slid right into a chat question that we had received too of the, in hindsight, is there a situation that you encountered that you would handle differently? And it's the live and learn, and I think that's a fantastic point on how we can all handle these things that come up in ways that our counterparts in other sports and other seasons may have learned from them. So Kerry, let's just shift back to you. Anything that you've learned in the last 12 months that you think you're better for knowing?
I just, I think probably the organization part of it, when this all started, we had an emergency operations committee on campus, and really nobody was thinking of athletics. That was the furthest thing from their mind. It was like, how do we just operate? So I think it was kind of cool how all of us came together to come up with a plan. And we reached out to SEC schools, and we reached out to other people to find out what was the best practices. And then also, as we go along through this thing, figuring out different ways to do things. I do think Sam is right. Playing in the spring has been phenomenal because, if you're basketball, I feel so sorry for them because they were right at the height of the pandemic where the positivity rates were sky high, and you see all these people going, the programs having to kind of go on pause. We get to learn from all of that. And I think all of that learning and changing and pivoting and change, we've been able to succeed because of that. And, I think it's been the collaboration that you have to go through has also been a pretty cool thing to see, because you do have to stick together. I mean, that's the only way. If you don't, you kind of get swallowed up by it because it's so overwhelming at times.
Thank you very much. Denny, how about you? Anything that you've learned from that you would change in a hindsight?
I don't know if I would change a whole lot, other than I think the kids have learned. Last fall was pretty good for us early on, and throughout the season we didn't have any issues. And then Halloween hit, and there was a party or two off campus, and a lot of athletes went, and I had a few of my own players went, and that's when it hit us. And so all the way the school left on Thanksgiving on November 20th. And so, and those last 2 weeks just before they left, we had high rates, and it was all athletes, and my team, et cetera, were all because half a dozen kids went to this party, and they didn't think, and that was part of it. They didn't think, well, they're all my other teammates or other athletes, but they had some other former alumni come around because it was a party, and it just spread like wildfire. And so we use that as an example for this year. And say, guys, you can't do that. You can't go off campus. You got to stay within your pod, stay within your family. And the kids have been very good all so far. And I don't anticipate them changing because they want to play, and we harp that all the time. But that one incident in November for Halloween was enough to really, I think, scare them maybe of what could happen and how it will happen if they go out of bounds and kind of get cut loose if they want to do it. So that was probably the one thing.
Thank you very much. And we'll go around the horn here and have everybody kind of give us a piece of advice, or however you would want to leave the group with your thoughts on what coaches need to do to have the most successful spring possible. What would you encourage them to do, and how to keep themselves and their athletes safe? Owen, let's start with you.
I think Kerry brought up a great point earlier. The biggest thing is collaboration. You'll see it within your own team, and you ask your student athletes to do it. So why wouldn't we do it in this scenario? And you're getting different aspects from different areas across campus. across your athletics department, wherever it may be. Collaboration will make this work for you all and make it a lot more fluid, because you have more individuals with ideas that they can bring to the table and you just discuss things through. What I've seen is that is key component to coming up with great mitigation policies and programs. And then just be forthright and honest with your student athletes. Bring everything to the table, keep them fully informed, and they'll be thankful, and you will be in the end as well.
Thank you very much. Denny, let's go back to you. Same question.
I think same thing. Communication with your athletes. For me, I've tried to show a little more love, I guess, a little more caring, just to show that they're safe. I think that's always in their mind. How safe are we going to be? And I have to tip my hat to my administration. They've tried to keep Alma College as a pod themselves, and do not want people to go off campus. Same thing with the dorm rooms. They're saying, well, we're locked in, coach. I go, yeah, but look at the bright side. The rates are down, the numbers are way low, and that's the main reason. So I think you just got to stay communicating with them, stay happy, collaborate, like Owen was saying. I hate the word we'll get this through together, because it's all the time, but you really do. You just got to say, hey, we're doing this. We get to play. We're having fun together. You guys come to practice, and that's where I see the smiles, because that's your outlet. So as long as you keep communication with not only you, the administration, and your athletic trainers, it works out really well.
Thank you very much. Sammy, how about you? Any tips or tricks that you would really encourage coaches to look into?
It was touched on a lot about communication, and I think Owen touched on it about honesty. So really just making sure that they have as much information as possible. So not kind of filtering out what we think is important for them to know, but rather just giving them all the information. And then really on our team as well, we encourage them to ask specific questions. So same thing, running scenarios through their mind of, what does a normal game day look like for me? What do I normally do? Am I allowed to do it? And then encouraging them to actually ask those questions for us, so that, again, we can provide a safe alternative if need be. Some of my questions pre-travel came from them, because they just thought of things that I was like, wow, I would have never thought about that, because it just doesn't happen for me, but it happens for them as players. So just kind of empowering them to really take ownership of it, ask plenty of questions, so that we're not in a scenario where they did something just because they didn't know. I would rather they know everything, and then just be able to ask questions about it. And so far they've done a great job, and they've taken ownership. And I think that that's what's helped us continue to follow our policies this spring.
Thank you very much. And Kerry, you got to hit lead off to start, and now you get to go clean up to end. So what would you throw out there as being really important for coaches to consider right now?
Communicate the expectations and what needs to happen, so they do have the information. And then one thing I've tried to do is I try to ask my kids every day, how are you? And it started from the beginning of the pandemic, because the mental health piece has become so important to make sure that they're okay, because they face a lot of uncertainty. And this is, I try to tell them, I've never been through anything like this either, guys, so, it's all new for us, but always try to check on your kids and make sure that mentally they're doing okay, because it's a lot of stress from a lot of different things. The world today is stressful. COVID stressful, athletics is academics. They're getting hit from all sides. So I'll make sure that they're doing okay.
Great advice. And thank you, especially all of our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. As a reminder, you can get this forum or any other forum that we have had over the last 12 months at our nfca.org page. We have plenty of resources there for you as well. But Denny, Kerry, Owen, Sammy, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time and sharing your insights with us. For those of you that are listening, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, keep your team safe, Best of luck for you as you compete throughout the spring and summer. We'll be back next month with another episode, so make sure you are staying in touch with our social media outlets as well as the website to see what's coming up next. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.